Hi, Leslie.
Hi, good
How
to
are you?
see you.
You too. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing good. So, tell us all about tell us about you.
About me?
Tell
Okay.
us about you.
Well, my name's Leslie Early. I'm currently an instructional designer. Formerly was a teacher for about 10 years. I'm also running a podcast right now and just trying to, I don't know, I just feel like I'm always learning new things, trying new things, always looking for new ways to be creative. So I'm always just doing a little bit of everything, it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. There's quite a few of us out there trying to do
Yeah.
just a little bit of everything. What would you say are some of your biggest accomplishments in life and in work?
Well, I mean, I do think most recently making that transition was a huge accomplishment for me. I stopped teaching in 2017 and started working somewhere else for a while, and then enrolled in a. I accomplished. I got my master's, so yay for that.
All right.
And then this year, finally transitioned into a full time instructional design position. So for me, that was like a big relief to get into a career that I feel is better suited to some of my strengths and interests. So yeah, I
Yeah.
also survived. I will say survived, thrived. Lived 8 years in Seoul, South Korea, and I feel like that's a pretty big accomplishment. Not that many people go abroad or stay abroad that long. I mean, there
Yeah.
there is a club of us, but I feel pretty proud of that. That I had that experience as well.
What
So
did you get to do there?
I was teaching English, yeah. So that's part of my teaching experience, and um,
Does that
yeah,
mean you also speak Korean?
I can speak a little bit.
Okay.
But it depends how many drinks I've had. That's how good I speak at Korean. Yeah, how well.
Does it get
So
better the more drinks you
generally, I would
have?
say yes. And the best, most fluent conversations I've ever had in Korean are like on the way home after drinking and talking to the taxi drivers. Like
Yes.
those were like my real conversation practice times.
That's pretty funny. So I'm going to kind of take that question I just asked you and flip it a little bit. What would others say about you? What would they say are your biggest accomplishments?
um, I mean, I can only say what I'm guessing. I think I have, even though I have this like always looking around for new things, I do also have the ability for whatever reason, once I do find that one thing, to sort of stick with it. I have a certain stick with itness about, but it's very selective, and I don't know how my brain chooses which thing is going to be the thing that I stick with. But yeah, I think I can put on my diligence hat for certain things. And I think that's something that people have told me about myself, that it was something that they wished they had more of, I guess. It's not it's I wish it was about something like exercise or eating healthy, but
Yeah.
it's not any of that. No, it's very like interest based. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what has been your experience with imposter syndrome?
Um so I think I've I went to school to study music recording, actually. So and then after I graduated, thought I was going to be in um, thought I was going to work at a record label.
Mhm.
Like, so I moved to New York City, thought that was going to be my big life. As soon as I started going on these interviews at record companies, that was real imposter syndrome. Like, that was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel so out of my element. And actually, at that time, it was, I think, a little deeper than just imposter syndrome. It was like, this is not the right path for me. And
Mhm.
so I went somewhere else, but I went a different way. But, in all of my creative endeavors, I think if you choose to live a creative life, I think you're just going to come up against this feeling of imposter syndrome no matter what. And I just feel like that's sort of one of the prices you have to pay if this is the type of life you want to lead. Like, you can't, there's no way around it. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who said, I never have self doubt, or I
Uh-huh.
never, um, I'm always 100% certain of my capabilities and that everything I do is going to be amazing and impress everybody. Like, I don't think I've ever met somebody who feels
Well,
that way.
if you do, they're probably lying to you. So
Right.
you might not want to be their friend. I don't know. So tell us about, if you can remember, sort of your first encounter with imposter syndrome, like when you first realized that you had it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I think insecurity is what I always felt before. I don't know if I've labeled it imposter syndrome until more
Mm,
recently,
mhm.
as an adult, and these things sort of start to come into everybody's like vernacular. And so I think, um, yeah, like I think more recently, I I identify it with it because I am a career changer. So I think right now that's sort of like, oh, I wouldn't call it insecurity necessarily. I have a name for this now. It's like, this is imposter syndrome. And it is because I feel like I don't have a certain level of experience or possibly skill sets that might be required for this career that I am in or aspire to do well in.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I can clearly label this as, okay, this is what everyone means when they're talking about imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
in this very specific way. But I feel like imposter syndrome is like the step, no, not even step, is like the twin of, or a fraternal twin of like perfectionism and like that
Mhm.
kind of, that set of,
They are definitely cousins at a minimum.
at least
Yep.
cousins. Yeah. So I've dealt with the perfectionism and insecurity and those kinds of anxieties. But I think specifically right now, in this career change, can label it as imposter syndrome.
So, what would you say it feels like when you're having sort of an episode of imposter syndrome? What are your thoughts, feelings, emotions?
Gosh. Um, well, I think we all think like, am I good enough? Like is do I have the right skill set um to do this justice in the way that I want to do it? Or, and then there's also the, what do other people think? Are other people judging my performance on this task? So it's a lot of like, I think it's a lot of like observing yourself, but also imagining other people observing you and trying to guess what they're thinking. Um, so it can be a really bad rumination cycle for me.
Yeah, kind of sucked into your own head.
Yeah,
Can't seem to separate your thoughts from reality.
yeah.
Do you have any like physical reactions that you've noticed when you're really deep in the midst of a moment of imposter syndrome?
I mean, for me, like I'm a shaker. So like when I get nervous or like have some feeling some anxiety, I will like just start trembling. Like it's like, and I'm sure that's pretty common, but for me, I just feel like everyone can see that I'm shaking right now,
Uh-huh.
and then that makes it worse because you're like, ugh, people are seeing how nervous I am, and then but I want to appear confident, but actually, and maybe you might even like logically feel pretty confident in your skills, but for whatever reason, um, physiologically things still sometimes can take over and you're like, why am I shaking so much? I'm not even that nervous, or
Yep.
things
And
like
then you
that.
get angry because it's involuntary and you're
Right.
like, "Stop it." And it doesn't stop.
No.
Yeah, I understand. So, do you still struggle with imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Mhm.
I feel like I feel like it's, if not daily, maybe like every other day. To be fair, again, I'm still relatively new in my career, and um, I I just feel sometimes overwhelmed by the amount of things that, we in L&D or instructional design. There's so many things to always be staying. current on, or there's
Mhm.
always new tools, always new theories. Theories are being debunked, and it's like a lot of discourse, and just like trying to keep up with all of that feels sometimes really overwhelming. So I just like go through mental shutdowns sometimes, be like, I can't interact with this. I'm just going to observe what everybody has to say. But imposter syndrome in the sense that like I don't have a strong viewpoint, so I will say nothing.
Mhm.
Like I find myself in that space quite a lot. And I think one of my ways around it, or I don't know if I didn't do this intentionally, but now that I'm thinking about it, is that maybe that's what the podcast for me is it provides a way to talk to people in a way that's digestible. Like it's just one conversation between me and another person. And yes, it's being recorded, but it can be edited, so it's
Sure.
not like a
Sure.
live conversation. So it's that's a way of like, this is a way that I can learn and meet people that is digestible for me, because I can't, the funnel of all the information that is available out there in the world is just so wide that it's
Mhm.
quite overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
So,
So when you feel that overwhelm and you start to feel that imposter syndrome, it sounds like it creates some silence in you,
yeah.
and it's almost like a paralysis. Like if
Mhm.
you could explain like being paralyzed but still able to move, which is completely contradictory, but like you want to move, you could move, but you won't move and you can't move.
Right. Well, that's like, the fight or flight now has been
Mhm.
updated to fight, flight, or freeze.
Or
And I
freeze,
know
yes.
I'm definitely freeze. Like, I just freeze. I just shut down. Like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do to get out of this uncomfortable feeling. And so I shut down.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's why for me, one of the best ways to get around imposter syndrome or those kind of bad feelings is to create an environment for myself where what am I trying to say here? To try and construct some sort of environment where it's low stakes enough that I can try to be vulnerable. And if that means putting the right people around me,
Mhm.
or even just being alone for a while to process and get my thoughts out in a different way rather than face-to-face conversation. But whatever that case may be, I think that's how I sort of deal with it, is like knowing the things that are going to trigger imposter syndrome in myself and avoiding that. And if I can avoid it, then how do I make accommodations for myself to get through it? Because, like, for instance, public speaking is not my favorite thing to do. So one of my accommodations I do for myself is like, well, I can bring someone with me.
Uh-huh.
If I have someone who I trust who's in that experience with me, for whatever reason, that just makes me brave enough to just move forward, because it's like, well, I trust this person, and if they're with me, then clearly they trust me that I'm not going to like mess this up. So
Uh-huh.
I think the two of us together, we'll get it done. So
Yeah. That's a good coping mechanism, a good technique, as long as you can get somebody else to go with you.
right.
Because sometimes you're like, "Please, anybody. Anybody?"
Right.
Yeah. What would you say, is there anything that makes it better? Like, anything that like, "When this happens, I'll feel better," or, "If I do this, I know I'll feel better." Like, something specific.
um I just think it's just taken a lot of practice of being uncomfortable, to be honest. Like, I think at this point I've just accepted, I know the stages of it. It's like, okay, there's the excitement stage where I agree to something, or I take on a project, or I have a good idea for something I want to do, and it's super excitement, and I know that there's going to be a valley of like self-doubt,
Mm,
imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough, this is a crazy idea, what was I thinking? Like, knowing that this is the pattern, and
yes.
identifying it as that, and just knowing, take a deep breath, go binge some Netflix, do what you have to do to like get through that valley and know that tomorrow I'll wake up and it'll be a new day, and I may still feel intimidated. I may still feel all of those negative feelings, but I also know that if I just push through it and do it, that on the other side of that, there's probably a lot of positive things waiting. Like presenting when I don't, it's, public speaking is not my thing, but I know I've met so many people and had so many positive experiences that it felt really crappy going through it. Like my heart was racing, I was sweating, I was shaking.
Yeah.
But then when I got through it, so many people, when I shouldn't say so many, 3 people who were in that presentation, would approach me and say, "Oh, and you get new relationships out of that,
Mhm.
or you have a new opportunity." So it's just, I think for me, being aware that it's a pattern, recognizing it, and coming up with coping strategies to get through it without the expectation that I know I will never not feel this way. Like, I think
Right.
that's unrealistic to say, I'm not going to feel this way. It's
Uh-huh.
just, how am I going to get through it in a healthy way? So,
Yeah. So recently you and I had a conversation and you were you were having some imposter syndrome in that
yeah,
conversation.
definitely.
And and it was interesting to me because as I'm watching it happen, you start squirming, like you're like literally your body language changed and you're a pretty calm, relatively still human. I am not I've never been accused of either of those things. So when you start squirming, I noticed that, the level of discomfort in what we were talking about was reaching that deep inner core that makes you feel like I can't do this.
Yeah.
What was it that we were talking about? Do you remember?
It was for a public speaking event.
Oh,
It
look at
was
that.
for,
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Which is my thing that I really makes me most uncomfortable. Yeah.
Makes you like start shaking and sweating and that
Yeah.
sounds like a terrible idea. What'd you decide to do about that?
That specific opportunity, I accepted it. I mean, the details haven't been worked out yet, but I did agree to go ahead and do it. But I am using a coping mechanism and having some people come in with me, and we're going to do a panel rather than just me being a presenter. Maybe one day I'll I'll be a sole presenter, but I don't think
Yeah.
it's in my near future right now.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
You add value by yourself, you add value with a group of people. So there's nothing wrong. Plus it gives other people a chance to get up there with you. So that's awesome. So I'm just gonna note one thing. And that was when I asked you what you decided to do about that. You when you were telling me that you accepted it, your eyes began blinking super rapidly, almost like you were trying to deflect any judgment that was coming your way, like with your eyelids. And I know that look because I've done that many times. Like you do this rapid blinking that you can't now you're very conscious of it. Sorry.
Yeah.
But like you did, like that's the first time we've done that in this whole conversation. You were like, well, and it's almost like that feeling you had when you were a kid and your parents asked you a question and you knew the answer might get you in trouble, but you weren't sure. So you were like tentatively telling them. And I mean, that's a your body language screaming imposter syndrome because you're like, I did, but maybe I shouldn't have.
Yeah, I like I said though, I just accepted that
Yep.
these two ambiguous feelings of like confidence, but also insecurity, like they just are two sides of the same coin, and that's just how it's gonna be. And
You might as
I
well just invite imposter syndrome to sit down next to you because
ex-
it's not going anywhere.
no,
So just
no.
yeah, just accept it and welcome it to the fold. Very cool. What would you say, what would you share with someone who is experiencing imposter syndrome?
Um, again, I just think that just trying to be reassuring that these are universally felt. I think most of us feel this,
Mhm.
and I think it's because we are social animals, and we all want love and acceptance from the people in our community, and so that it comes from a noble place. I think that the not wanting to let people down, not wanting to disappoint people, not wanting to come across as disingenuous. I think these are all noble qualities that we have, but
Yeah.
for whatever reason, because um, we are so dependent on socialization and community, that the idea that for some reason our community might turn on us, even though it's like that's totally illogical, right? Like no one's going to turn on you because like
Yeah.
you may
Yeah.
not be completely qualified or whatever, or you may stutter or whatever the thing may be.
Yeah.
But because we're so like obsessed with that, we're just really terrified that, you know, that we could lose those social connections. And so all of that is completely understandable. So if we try to rationalize it and just be like, it's normal, we all feel this way, and, you know, just again, find some help, whatever your healthy coping mechanism is. Some people have like, you know, mantras they do, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which I don't know that much about, but some people say it helps them.
It's a thing.
Um,
It's a thing.
yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, just I guess experiment, notice your own patterns and try to cope with those in a healthy way.
Yeah. That's good advice. All right. Last question for you is this: why did you want to be part of this imposter syndrome project?
Well, when you first posted about it, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a great topic to get into. Also, because obviously I struggle with these things, but I think a lot of us do. I really do think it's like relatively universal in some way or another. And so um, I would like to just, if somehow talking about it helps someone else who maybe hasn't had time to think about it as much, to process a little bit or come out with some sort of positive takeaway, that I don't know, really just to try and help out by sharing my own experience, maybe helping others who might be feeling something similar. And I'm sure there are plenty. So
Yes. Well, we appreciate that and so appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story. Yeah. So thanks, Leslie.
thank you, Betty.
If you like this series and you want to show support, go to buymeacoffee.com/ifyouaskbetty to learn more about how you can support this and future If You Ask Betty projects.